Okay, I am calling to order this regular meeting of council. First, I'd like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the traditional unceded territory that's Nanawa's First Nation. First item on the agenda is adoption of the agenda. I'll just simply make the motion that the November 16, 2022 regular council meeting agenda with a replacement page for page 8.
Recording in progress.
Anyways, be included or sorry, replace the page 8 in our agenda. So is there a seconder? Okay, second by Councillor Mundell. Any discussion on the agenda? Councillor Jones, go ahead.
Yes, please. Thank you. I'd like to make a recommendation, please, that items 9B, 9C, and 9D, that's page 2 of the agenda, be removed from tonight's meeting and rescheduled for late January or February. This is just simply because we have a very full
Okay,
agenda.
so I'm just going to cut you off there, Councillor Jones. So that it sounds like there's a motion to amend the agenda to remove 9B, C, and D from the agenda and to move to a meeting in January or February. Do you have a specific date in January, February? It usually helps to have a specific date to move.
I hadn't thought of a specific date, but if we could look at perhaps the last meeting in January, that would
Okay,
work.
it's, just give me 2 seconds. There's an amended schedule in our agenda here. What page is that? And we haven't updated.
I think that would be January 25th.
All right, if that is a regular meeting of council, okay, so to refer that or to remove it and then refer it to January 25th, you said?
Yes,
Okay, is there
thank
a
you.
seconder to that? Okay, second by Councillor Savage. We'll open it for discussion. So Councillor Jones and then Councillor Savage.
Yes, thank you. It's just simply that we have a very full agenda tonight. We have some important priorities that I would like us to get to. And that's basically it. In my opinion, that's going to improve the time management for this evening.
And then through the seconder, if you wish.
Yes, I agree. We've got a full plate. I would rather concentrate on our priorities. We have so many very pressing issues to do, and I'd also like to transition to a situation where we have a little more direction for what's on agendas, and so this one will clear off some of what I feel are some more pressing issues in the next month or so. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, and again, this is just amending the agenda. So I'll just call the question on the amendment. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. So we're back to the main, or I guess back to the agenda as amended. So removal of items 9B, C, and D. Is there any further discussion on the agenda? Okay, hearing or seeing none, I will call the question then. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. So that moves us on to item 7 of the agenda, so the start of the consent agenda. So just for council's benefit, if there's any item or a set of minutes in this case that you'd like to have removed, this is the time to request that. Otherwise, we just treat them as a block. Councillor Jones?
Sorry, I just had, I think you would call it a point of information, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're being asked to approve minutes for meetings that we were not in attendance at. Is that normal?
Yeah, it's fairly
for
normal.
that?
So the minutes are in the agenda this evening, and so essentially you're just voting on them in terms of just general correctness.
Fine, and if we wanted to ask for further information, we would be able to just request that?
Sure,
If we felt we were missing something? Thank you.
Just for clarity, what's on the agenda is the minutes, so your comments are about would be limited to the correctness of the minutes.
Councillor Lerner?
Just a point of information or clarification. I noticed that there was the amendment to the minutes, and I was just having trouble determining what the difference was between the original version and the new version.
We'll pass that off to Director Coates.
So if you go to the top of page 2 of 3, and the second item D, it says bylaw number 322, and then the motion incorrectly says that the minutes be approved. And so what, in fact, it should have said is what's on the green sheet, that District of Lantzville 2022 to 2026 Financial Plan bylaw number 289, 2021 Amendment bylaw number 322, 2022 be adopted.
Okay, thank you. That
Okay.
clarifies it. Thank you. No, I don't have any further questions.
Okay, and again, that's on page 8 of the current agenda. That's what we're replaced when we, yeah. Okay, so is there anything further? Okay, so I'll just simply make the motion that the recommendations listed for items 7A through to 7E in the consent agenda be approved. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Lerner. There's no discussion on this or debate. I'll just simply call the question. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. All right, so that takes us on to public input period. So I'll just read the preamble here. Oops. Big old binder clipping away. All right, so persons recognized by the chair to speak must first state their name and address for the record and may speak once for up to 2 minutes unless council resolves otherwise. Comments must be directed to the chair and not to be directed to individual members of council, staff, or the audience, and must not include personnel issues. Is there any member of the gallery that wishes to speak this evening? Oh, and just press the button. We need the, again, I don't know why they're red. It should be green. It makes no sense. Just name and address for the record, please.
Susan Cormie, 7130 Sebastian Road, Lantzville. I'm curious to know about the Village South properties. They seem to be doing some work there, clearing land, altering land.
Okay, so I'm just gonna
Yeah.
have to stop you there. That's not on the agenda, so.
Oh, it has to be on the agenda?
Yes, has to be on this
So
evening's
when
agenda.
can I ask a general question?
You would have to essentially email that into the district.
Okay, well, I tried. Thank
Or
you.
you can phone and try and get a hold of a live body, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Or if you stick around to the end of the meeting, you may even be able to talk to staff at the end of the meeting. Okay. All right, anybody further? Yes, go ahead. Name and address for the record, please. And again, speaking to agenda items.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Dave Scott, live at 6898 Harwood Drive. I was going to speak to 2 items tonight, one being the complex buildings that was on 9B, but I believe you've deferred that to January now. So I'll speak to the other item I was going to speak to, and that is item 12F of tonight's agenda. And that's regarding Lantzville Road pedestrian cyclist upgrades. I'm a little confused as to why the district would pull a grant application for $500,000 of provincial funding. We're all taxpayers. I like getting senior government money back. When the district has spent significant amounts of money on project design and application submission. We've spent a lot of engineering money, and of course, anytime we make these applications, there's a bunch of staff time and or consultant time that is spent for the submissions. The project was approved by council in their financial plan. It's been on the financial plan for some time. And many members of the community are supportive of these safer pedestrian and cycling routes. You know, we've had a number of people raise it along Lantzville Road, Dickinson Road, Alds Road, that we need safer pedestrian and cycling routes, and that's what this does. So, as I say, I'm a little confused as to why we would pull an application that's been submitted to the government already. If we don't get the money, we don't get the money, but if we don't have an application in, we won't get any money. Thank you.
Any additional speakers? And again, just name and address for the record, please.
Brian Blood, 7075 Collette Road. 12F, Lantzville Road active transportation upgrades. There's a good reason for you not to proceed with this. And that is, until you can answer the question, what do motorists, what do pedestrians, cyclists, and transit users need from our trunk routes? Unless you can answer that question comprehensively, and I don't think you can, and I don't think staff can, and I don't think the consultants can, then you have to put this project on, either eliminate it like you're going to do here and bring it up later. And it really speaks also to the need for public participation, which I know that this council is intent on addressing. And that's one way to find out what motorists, cyclists, pedestrians, and transit users do need from our trunk roads. It would be irresponsible to proceed with this under any other circumstances.
Okay, and again, anybody else from the gallery wishing to speak this evening? And I should have checked to see if we had anybody remotely registered. I can't see it up there. Okay. Thank you. So at this point, we'll move on in the agenda. So we're on to 9A. So we have a development variance permit application for 7390 Sunbury Road. We'll get it on the floor and then we'll go from there. So is someone prepared to make the motion? Okay, go ahead, Councillor Lerner.
Development variance permit application 7390 Sunbury Road. The development variance permit number DVP 22-6 for 7390 Sunbury Road be issued to vary section 2.12.1 of District of Lantzville zoning bylaw number 18220 by reducing the coastal setback from 15 meters to 13.7 meters, subject to approval by the Ministry of Environment.
Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Mundell. Discussion on motion. So to the mover and then to the seconder. So go ahead, Councillor Lerner, if you wish, and then Councillor Mundell.
Yes, there's a lot of documentation related to this. Seems to provide a lot of information that seems to be quite thorough. I did have a question through your worship to staff regarding the sketch plan on page 23 of the agenda, which was just to clarify, I see both a swimming pool and a roof extension and then a building. So I just want to clarify, is it just the roof extension that itself, just the roof that is extending past, or is any part of the building or pool extending?
Your worship, through the council, it's just the roof. So if you look at the slide that I have on the screen there, it's just that area in red, right here. So if I may, perhaps this will help. So this elevation drawing is the back portion of the existing house. Just back up a bit. This is what the existing house looks like today. The applicants are proposing to basically enclose that patio area and provide additional roof to protect this section of patio, which is this area over here. Oh, sorry. This area over here. As you can see from the elevation drawing, the intent is to tie into the existing roof line, and so that it looks consistent and one, rather than trying to come up with some alternate design for the roof structure. And in doing so, there's a slight encroachment into the setback.
Okay, thank you. Just one further question through your worship to staff. It mentioned about a landscaped garden. So if I might understand that there's already a garden in that area and that's what it is going to overhang?
That's correct. So if you look at the pictures on the screen, it outlines what it looks like today, and so the garden work would be in that area. So there's no intention to encroach further into the protection area, the coastal protection area.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mundell, if you wish, and then I'll open up to the rest of the body.
Just a question in the motion, it says subject to approval by the Ministry of Environment. So we're approving this before we get that approval from the ministry?
So what we're saying through this motion is that from the district's perspective, we're supportive, or if council does support the motion, council is, the District of Lantzville is supportive of the proposed variance. There's also recognition that there's an existing covenant on title between the property owner and the Ministry of Environment. So that covenant was put in place at the time of subdivision. And at the time that the property was subdivided, the approving authority would have been the Ministry of Transportation at the time. And so it's a fairly standard covenant that the ministry puts on. It's a 15-meter setback, which aligns with our zoning bylaw. And so because the covenant is still in existence and still in play, the property owners do require support from the Ministry of Environment, confirming that there's no objections to the proposed relaxation.
Thank you.
Okay, and through the rest of the council. For myself, this is pretty straightforward. It's really an airspace thing, nothing more. So it's not really affecting the ground below, except for it may offer a bit more shade or protection from rain, but it'll be protecting the building. Unless there's anything further, I'm going to call the question. Okay, here seeing nothing, I will move to calling question. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. All right, so that brings us to 9E of the agenda. So we have the uncollectible property taxes. Someone prepared to make this motion? It's a long one. No one? Okay, I'll make it then. That council approves the write-off of the uncollectible property taxes in the amount of $4,009.74 for the year of 2022 on the manufactured home folio number 350.70160.110, formerly situated at 11-6820 Parklands Place, and further that council directs staff to apply to the minister under section 781 of the Local Government Act to manage and dispose of this said account receivable. And further that once ministerial approval is received, all outstanding amounts from other taxing authorities be deducted from their 2023 tax requisitions, and each of the taxing authorities be advised. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Savage. Discussion on the motion. Pretty straightforward. Okay, hearing or seeing nothing, I'll move to calling question. All those in favor? Oh, yeah, go ahead, Councillor.
Yes, through Chair to staff, please. I just wanted to confirm so that once you're deceased, I just wanted to make sure you cannot have property taxes collected from you if they're owed.
Your worship, we'd have to check that with the Department of Finance.
Yeah, well, that's what it was the last time. So I just wanted to find out, once you're passed on, you're safe. So finally, some relief. Thank you.
Okay, unless there's anything further, I will call the question. Okay, all those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. All right, that takes us on to item 10. So this is regarding the public art installation locations. This is my recommendation. I'll make the motion that staff be authorized to change the installation location from in the road right away at 7221 Lantzville Road, open bracket, authorized October 6, 2021, close bracket, to adjacent to Municipal Hall at 7192 Lantzville Road for the installation of the public art designed, created, and delivered by Leslie Robert Sam. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Savage. This one's pretty straightforward. Just to give it a little bit of background or context to this, I spoke to the artist directly, and we kind of both, well, he came to the conclusion that it probably should be somewhere more central to the village. And so we discussed it further, and I agreed. I felt like such a wonderful piece of artwork that has significant meaning behind it should be somewhere more central and not in front of the Seaview Plaza, in front of Four Cats there. So in talking with staff, I asked staff to see if there's maybe another location more central, and that's how the 71920 or 92 address got thrown out, which is basically directly below us here. And yeah, that's basically it. The only thing, and I don't know if staff would need further direction, would be to when the final site is selected, if this motion passes, is to also speak with artists about the orientation of the artwork and its location and proximity of the building and so forth, as it may have some meaning, whether it's facing north, south, east, west, who knows? So I think it'd be worthwhile.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what Mr. Spears is intended. It is a short time frame to prep the site, so we also need to have some input from council on when you would like to have, I assume you want to have an unveiling or an opening, or some type of a celebration, so we can follow up on that by email, I guess.
So in terms of short turnaround time, like, are we saying like by the end of this year or?
I understood by the end of this year. He
Yeah.
says it takes a couple days for the cement to cure,
Okay,
then it's,
yeah. All right, I'm sure, yeah, we'd probably want to do something. But anyways, go ahead, Councillor Savage, if you wish, and then we'll open up to the rest of
Yes,
the body.
thank you. So you've got quite the artistic streak in you, Mayor Swain. I first discovered this when you started painting your election signs 4 years ago. But anyway, you're at it again. This was your idea originally to create this piece of art. It's a beauty. And again, it's your idea to move it to what I consider a far better place. It'll just get lost in that area down there. And the two reasons I think it's such a good spot, it underlines our commitment.
Gonna call a point of privilege. Can we have the doors closed or ask the people in all to go downstairs? Sorry, I find it quite distracting as well. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Savage.
Yeah, it underlines our commitment to our working with Snanawas. And nothing can underline that more than having I know it's art, but it's symbolic of a deeper meaning, which is having it right at our seat of local government really sends the message that we're serious about our partnership. So I think it's good for that one. And plus, it's physically and aesthetically a much better spot for it. It'll dress up this building a bit, give it a little flair. I don't know it's really got the best architecture. You'd have to have seen how it was all developed many years ago, but anyway. I quite like it. I think it'll be perfect in one of the, probably on the left garden as you're facing the building, because it's not blocking any windows there. And if it's tilted a little bit towards as you come in, then you'll see it directly as you come in. And there's nothing wrong with it being, behind the tree or somewhat behind the tree, because in the winter those will be bare branches and it gives it a little more of a setup. So, and the tree can be pruned as well, so it always can be seen well. So fully support it. Thank you.
And through to the rest of the council. Okay. And one thing also I forgot to mention is, just like our territorial acknowledgements at the beginning of every meeting, it definitely symbolizes, the territory we do operate our local government from. So I think it does have a lot of meaning behind it, and excited about potentially other pieces to follow. So unless there's anything further, I will go ahead, Councillor Savage.
One last point. This doesn't mean, Mayor Swain, that you can automatically put one of your originals in front here. So there's going to be a little bit of scrutiny with standards there.
Well, don't know how to respond. So we'll just move on to calling the questions. So all those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. And then as Director Coates indicated, there probably will be some follow-up just indicating, when we would likely do the kind of the unveiling of it. So, okay. So moving on to 12 on our agenda. So we have council and mayor updates. So kind of start, I guess, down that end tonight. So Councillor Lerner, go ahead if you wish.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I want to thank the fellow councillors and staff and the public for all of their patience as we get oriented to being in this position. And I wanted to say what a moving experience it was to go to the Remembrance Day ceremony that was just wonderful at the Legion. And I know Mayor Swain laid a wreath on behalf of the district, and Sophia sang twice. So it was really a wonderful occasion and very meaningful and moving. So thank you to the community and to the Legion for that.
Councillor Jones.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say on the record, residents might be interested, that we're starting to have some discussions that we hope will eventually, sooner rather than later, put a value to Lantzville's natural assets. And this is a new language to hear, natural assets, in other words, like building resilient communities. So I thought this would just be a good opportunity to introduce some new terminology that I hope we'll be hearing a lot more about, and that Lantzville can become a leading community in the valuing of its natural assets. That's things like tree canopies, streams, that type of thing, for sure. Thank you, that's all.
Councillor Savage.
Yes, thank you. This is very timely. That's why I'm mentioning it. But we have our Phase 2 Village Improvement Streetscape waiting in the wings, as we did receive the grant. And through chair to staff, if I may ask, please, if this is good, will council have an opportunity to approve or make changes to the second phase of the village improvement streetscape design, or is it going straight to tender? And would it require a motion from council to request approval before it goes to tender? Thank you.
Through you, your worship, to council, no, it will be coming back to council as requested by the mayor.
Okay, so it will be coming back to council for sure before it goes to tender for approval.
That's right, to take a look at it, make sure it's
Yeah,
what you want.
thank you. So in that case, I will, my council update is I'm most looking forward to working with our new councillors. In my opinion, we've got a real all-star cast here, sophisticated and smart. So I do look forward to working together, and just for the sake of the community, you are going to see a lot of differences of opinion, because I know the new council members, and it's quite common that we disagree on certain things, but you will see a collegiality and working together, trying to compromise, come up with consensus, and so on. So anyway, most looking forward to the new term. We certainly got off to a fast start with the tree bylaw, which is temporary. I think we can't underline that enough. And we look forward, we originally made the motion back in April to get a tree bylaw. So my understanding is any time now, we should be getting one where we can be working on it, a permanent one, and it will have tons of resident input and be working together to come up with something, hopefully, that most can agree on. Thank you.
And Councillor Mundell.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm grateful for staff for the work that they put into getting us up to speed, and I'm sure the previous councillors can have a little chuckle now as I feel like we get inundated with all sorts of emails in this role, maybe 10 to 15 or more a day. So it's been a bit of a curve learning that, and staff's been very supportive. I'm grateful and really excited to see a lot of the, something that Councillor Jones pointed out was many of the emails that we're getting are around various different groups and organizations, advising us to really value our natural assets. The ICE-T one around Cortez set to create value-added forestry sector roadmap. There's another one around water sustainability and asset management are inextricably linked. So these are really, really great reads, and I wish I had more time to get to them all and sign up for all the webinars that are coming out from these. So that's just what I wanted to share, that I'm really happy to see that this momentum is moving through the province, and that hopefully Lantzville can become a part of that. And I'm looking forward to keeping up my Saturday, but also learning. There's a planning course through SFU, so I'm looking forward to attending that.
Great, thank you. For myself, again, just acknowledging the efforts of the Legion, and again, continuing on the tradition of remembrance. Super important, obviously, as we move forward. And it's really nice to see future generations there that will hopefully carry the torch and continue. And that's what I'm referring to there is the young people that show up, and you know, that's all the different cadets, where there's air cadets or sea cadets. It's really neat to see them out and about, and then families showing up and participating in the whole act of remembrance. So again, to the Legion, it's such an important event, and I would like to help them in some way, if possible, getting them a much better PA system for future ceremonies. And I just think it would be invaluable. And I think, you know, the amount of work the Legion does for the community, I think it's something this council should consider in assisting the Legion and potentially other service groups and having a better PA system for use in the park. But that's maybe for another day. And at this time, also acknowledging the efforts of staff with the onboarding and training and orientation of new council. I've gone through 2 of these, and I say this one by far seems like a lot, but it's necessary, and I appreciate the efforts that go into coordinating it and putting it all into motion. And then also with new council and even old council, in terms of the effort it takes to make, you know, to attend these different events and participate. Like Councillor Mundell, I'll be also attending virtually the planning, the SFU planning session for newly elected, but I might be a bit of an old dog, but I can learn new tricks too. So I think it's valuable to attend these things. And every time I attend even some of these seminars that appear to be repeats, you always take away something, you know, so you can't hear it enough. But I'm confident by probably the end of January, mid February, we'll be through it all, and then really, you know, working hard for the community. So there will be lots of information flowing our way, and it's a lot of work. And I'm sure as we get in even to December, you're going to be looking forward to the rest period in December, because we have a busy November and early December. So those are my updates for this evening. We'll move on in the agenda. So we have 12B under public recordings of council meetings. This is my recommendation. I'll make the motion that effective November 16th, 2022, council rescinds the March 9th, 2022 council directive that no member of the public shall record any live in progress meeting or portion of a meeting of council, whether by electronic audiovisual device, manually or otherwise, except as authorized by council. Is there a seconder? So seconded by Councillor Lerner. Discussion on the motion. This one's pretty straightforward. There was some materials included in this evening's agenda on page 118. There is a small typo, my mistake. I gave the wrong website. It's supposed to be recording, so I dropped the O in spelling out recordinglaw.com. But anyways, that's where I pulled that little bit of information. You know, again, this motion, like I said, it is pretty straightforward, because council of the day made it for governing its proceedings and how we carry out the council meetings of the day. Well, this is a new council, and this is something whether or not, or this council has to decide for themselves whether or not they want to continue on that path. Personally, I didn't agree with it at that time, and I don't agree with it at this time. I think this is something that goes way beyond our level of local government, and starts to infringe on people's rights, you know, that are afforded to us living in Canada. So until other laws change, I don't think we should be dipping our toe into this pond at all. So that's where I stand on it. I'll open up, or through to Councillor Lerner as a seconder, and then to the rest of the council.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I very much support this motion. I believe it speaks to the fundamental tenets of accessibility and transparency and the ability of the public to attend meetings and hold us accountable. I know it's not always fun to sit there and be recorded, but we're not talking about at our homes or in our personal lives. We're talking about here in the people's chamber doing the people's business. So I think that's very important. And of course, there would still be the prohibition on disruptions and devices making noises and stuff like that. So I think this is truly straightforward and really an important part of the public process. Thank you.
And through the rest of the body. Okay, Councillor Savage.
Yes, glad to see the end of this unnecessary overbearing policy. We should be maximizing residents' importance and minimizing councillors' importance. This policy did the opposite, so fully support it.
Councillor Jones.
I also fully support this. I think it's a start, an important one to reversing something that I agree shouldn't have happened. But going forward on a more positive note, it's a beginning of looking at policies that have true transparency between the district council and residents in this community. And I just want residents to get that message loud and clear that that is a high priority. Thanks.
And through the rest of council, I'd leave one remaining councillor. Yeah, Councillor, or sorry, Director Coates.
Yeah, definitely not council. Hi. Yeah, staff would be remiss if we didn't caution council, just, to let you know that we did receive advice from Pacific Audio, who does our sound system for our municipality and many municipalities on the island. And their concern is that somebody recording from the council chambers could cause our own system to fail. And you might ask, well, how could that happen? What would cause that? Well, if they were live streaming, and then it would cause the bandwidth issue. So we use a lot of bandwidth just to do Zoom and our broadcast. So their caution, they expressed great concern, the potential negative impact on our recording system, either live stream failure, Zoom connection loss, or interference. And we've had that experience where people have turned other devices on and it causes sound interference. Now, it may be that council's thinking about, dropping our recordings or broadcasting, and then, this would be moot. But, so there was that point. There's also the thing of it's best practice for a municipality to send people to their website rather than others doing recordings and then people being sent to other websites to look at recordings. The districts, also there's the FOI concern in that we position the camera very carefully so it's not looking at the public. Certainly as council, of course the camera is pointed at you. But if an individual is here and they're recording and we don't, or you don't put into your motion any kind of limitation, people could be putting the recording, pointing right at members of the public, right at staff, or, it wouldn't be as controlled. And also, when we enter the council chambers, part of the FOI advice for us is for recording, we publish a sign as you enter the chambers to warn people, because there are some people who don't want to be recorded. And so it's just to warn them that, it is a public space and we're recording it, and that the recording will be broadcast on the district website. Now, if a member of the public is recording, we don't know where that recording is going to be broadcast. So at a minimum, if council is proceeding on this, then we would need to adjust that sign to say, and there could be others recording, so that they're aware of that. And then certainly it's not unheard of. Qualicum Beach has had an issue with people taking a recording and chopping it up and doing weird things and broadcasting it. So there's also the loss of control there. But anyway, that's just what we wanted to make sure you were aware, so that if we do lose our sound system,
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Councillor Savage, go ahead.
Yes, in spite of all those perceived shortcomings, many, if not most, municipalities do not have this heavy-handed, forbidden use of cameras. They seem to be surviving just fine. And I far fear having rotten fruit thrown at me by being too undemocratic than, you know, having being video. Doesn't bother me at all if I'm edited. They can do whatever they want with it. So I'm going to fully support this, and will measure problems if they arise is the way to do it. I want this motion to be the default position, and then if we run into problems, we can look into it then. Thank you.
And just as a general comment in terms of bandwidth, you know, there are workaround solutions on that. Should there be a concern, then we'll deal with that. But again, I think bandwidth is a small problem compared to basically infringing on people's rights to make a recording if that's what they choose to do. You know, this isn't about controlling people and what they do. This is about allowing people to do what they want to do. So I'll leave it at that from my end. Councillor Mundell.
Just a question regarding the bandwidth. The bandwidth that the district uses for recording, is that accessible to guests? Or is that only, so is our Wi-Fi sort of protected in that it wouldn't be shared with guests?
anybody in the chambers would be accessing that bandwidth to send things out of the chambers, yes.
Okay, so could we not password protect that and prevent them from
And
using that bandwidth?
And, you know, we rely, we're not IT techs.
Right.
We're not, you know, communication techs. We rely on the expertise of the contractors that we use, and it's Pacific Audio. As I say, they do sound systems and broadcasting for many municipalities. When we ask them, you know, what, if any, are the risks, that's what they told us.
Fair enough, but maybe we could find that out from them?
I'm sure they would
password
have told
protect
us if there was a workaround, but I will, you know, refer them to you if you've got suggestions. I can.
Okay, so unless there's anything further, I'm going to call the question. Okay, all those in favor? That's carried unanimously. All right, that takes us on to the next motion regarding the COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant. Is someone prepared to make that motion? Councillor Savage, go ahead.
That effective November 16th, 2022, all spending from the COVID fund must be approved by council.
Okay, and seconded by Councillor Jones. Okay, discussion on the motion. Go ahead, Councillor Savage, if you wish.
Yes, basically, this is a COVID restart grant we got a couple of years ago, I believe, thereabouts. And it was for around 1.3 million, a little less than that, as I recall. And the current balance is $628,098, so that's a nice hunk left. And it's important we use this balance wisely with maximum benefit for residents. And the idea of needing council approval is so council can ensure it goes into items which are top priority for both council and also for residents. So within the guidelines, of course, on what it can be spent, of course, and we did get guidelines with the grant as to what it can be spent on, and it's fairly loose. They basically left it up to the district with guidelines and parameters and so on. And we did have a number of discussions last term as to what it could be used for or what it could not be used for. So we've got a fairly good idea of, you know, what it can and can't be. So that's the idea of moving ahead. So it just needs council approval, that's all. And which we did approve most of the expenses it was used for last term. So thank you.
Councillor Jones, if you wish, as the seconder.
I really don't have anything to add to that, but I would like to support those things that Councillor Savage has said as we try to get a hold of the financial plan and all of the budget items that we're going to see. This is certainly one of them. What's very important for us to not only see how the grant has been used, but to be able to make some decisions on behalf of the community and with respect to the priorities that we'll be setting. So I'm excited to see this motion. Thank you.
And through the rest of the council. Councillor Mundell.
Just some clarification on what we can spend this money on. Are there parameters? I'm just lost in the agenda here, trying to find if there are some specific parameters included.
Yeah, through to CEO Campbell.
Yes, Your Worship, there are guidelines, as has been mentioned, we can certainly provide them to you.
Thank you.
And just for clarity too, our experience has been, while they provided a list and some general guidelines, it's been more common that the Director of Finance, whoever it was at the time, would communicate with the ministry, send emails, there'd be an exchange. Is this covered? Is that covered? Is this eligible? Sometimes it was no, sometimes it was yes.
Yeah, there's, as far as I recall, there seems to be a fair bit of flexibility with respect to what the funds could be spent on, so. And through to staff, is that number that Councillor Savage mentioned, is that correct? Is that, I believe that's from the financial plan for 2023, 2020,
Worship,
2027.
It sounds correct to me, but I'm not, without talking to finance, I'm not quite sure, but it certainly sounds accurate.
Thank you. And just as a bit of a follow-up comment, with strategic planning for the new council, hopefully will be underway sooner than later. There may be things that come up within that where some of that COVID money could be earmarked towards. So it just depends on what the strategic priorities for this council will be over the next 4 years, and some of that may require funding. And what better source of funding than going back to the taxpayers and asking them. So so I think it may allow us to do a few different things over the course of this term without having to rely on increased taxation. So additional speakers? Okay, Councillor Savage, go ahead.
Yeah, just to give you two examples. One was we reduced, we paid for some of the infrastructure reserve from the COVID grant, the idea being that this helped residents, it helped to lower taxes for residents in 2022 to allow them to get some relief because of COVID and the economy. Another one was some items that staff got for the offices that were somewhat COVID-related because the COVID caused new requirements from staff. So to facilitate that, some materials were needed. And one was $60,000 to hire a PR person was another one. I forget the reasoning with that, but that was a council decision. So that gives you the parameter of the sorts of things that it was spent on. And yes, I don't know if that's the absolute balance, Mayor Swain, but I got that from the budget, that figure. So it's likely around that. So thank you.
Councillor Lerner.
Yes, just a question for clarification through to your worship or to staff. Is there a time frame by which we are required to spend the money, or is there a cutoff?
Yeah, Your Worship, I don't think there is.
Thank you.
Okay, unless there's anything further, I'm going to call the question. Okay, all those in favor, and that's carried unanimous. All right. That takes us on to the next item. This is under 12D, so this is parkland dedication This is Councillor Savage's recommendation, so over to you, Councillor Savage.
Thank you. That staff provide a draft bylaw for the November 30th, 2022 council meeting for council consideration to amend District of Lantzville Officers Indemnification and Delegation bylaw number 172, 2018 to strike for A, authority to determine whether parkland or payment of cash in lieu of parkland will be required as a condition of subdivision as required under Section 510, 1 and 2 of the Local Government Act, provided that parkland dedication is in accordance with the official community plan, policies, and requirements.
Okay, is there a seconder to the motion? Seconded by Councillor Mundell. Discussion on the motion, so through to Councillor Savage. And then
Thank you. Yes, this motion is to cure the problem that's, for me, permeated the entire last term, and that is the cash in lieu of parkland was given far too often instead of getting the parkland. And the basic problem with that is that my observation of every time it was done, the value you get from the cash in lieu is only 40% of the market value of the land. So financially, it's a poor investment. And so that's the first point. And the district will never achieve a network of trails or preserve an adequate amount of wildlife habitat and green space if public land is continually forsaken for an inadequate amount of cash. The current trend for municipalities is to view their public green space as an asset referred to as green infrastructure, mitigating rain runoff, cleaning the air, reducing highway noise, providing nature walks, and moderating air temperature are some of the benefits provided by the green infrastructure. And I've said that repeatedly the past 4 years and well before that. It's very important. So a lot of municipalities are doing that now. Also, such green space can help facilitate the district policy of on-site handling of drainage, such that post-development drainage flow equates or equals pre-development flow. When such green space is left in its natural state with trails, the maintenance cost is minimal. Furthermore, this is very important, that all during last term, the OCP calls for more than 5% parkland if you're going through a rezoning. And a perfect example of this is Lot A Dickinson Road. The previous zoning bylaw did not allow any subdivision because it had already been subdivided. The current zoning bylaw was the future study area, so any subdivision had to go through rezoning. So they got 12 lots where they were allowed no subdivision. That's a 1,200% increase in density, and yet all that was required was 5% parkland, and the cash of lieu was based on the 5% parkland. So I'm just pointing out the problems that I'm trying to cure here, and I feel the solution is to, for council to make the decision on cash in lieu so that all these things I mentioned are taken into consideration. And the last thing I'll say, there may be other steps such that are required so that approval officers can have guidance in subdivisions. There's no council involvement, but if we have it right in the OCP or other documents, then it'll give them guidance they have to follow. So at any rate, that's it. Thank you.
Anyways,
Is that a new rating system, Mayor Swain, that I did well, or?
that's the triangle button, makes that noise. Councillor Mundell as a seconder.
Yeah, and just from my perspective, I think this is a very important decision that the community is expecting this council to consider very carefully, and I think that it should be considered by council directly. So I agree with this motion.
Okay, additional speakers? Councillor Lerner, go ahead.
Yes, for me, I have spoken at multiple meetings before as a private citizen about the importance of parkland and preserving that. But to me, this comes down to the tenets of democracy and the idea that there is public input. And then there's the opportunity for council to, as elected representatives, to make that decision. And what I've seen is too often the developer or the applicants spending a lot of time drawing up plans because they are working under the recommendation in advance that it either be parkland or it be cash in lieu. And for that decision to rest with the elected representatives means more transparency, more input from the public, better system for the developers as well, because they'll have the opportunity to see which of the two are recommended by council and not to have to make plans that are then changed. And of course, this motion is to bring forward a bylaw or a draft of a bylaw for November 30th. So we'll still have time to judge the actual bylaw itself, make amendments and so on and so forth. So I can definitely support this motion.
Okay, additional speakers? For myself, yes, I can generally support this. I think what has always been the issue is, and it goes back to our OCP and indicating what parts of the municipality that we would be trying to acquire parkland through development. And with that map, had I known maybe at the time was going to be the real decision-making tool in determining what parkland was going to be kept and what was going to be essentially taken, or given away for cash. And in my opinion, it is kind of giving it away for cash because there's just, we're not getting hardly anything for it. So anyways, that seemed to be the part of the problem. So I guess really my question through to staff, is this enough just to have that stopgap measure in place, so council doesn't have to worry about parkland basically disappearing?
Well, I think your worship through the council, I think the motion that's being proposed by council speaks for itself, and certainly the direction is for staff to bring forward a report, and I would expect that once that report is brought forward, we'll definitely have some more fulsome discussion about the impacts of the recommendation. Um, you know, generally speaking, when an application is brought forward for council's consideration, staff does take the comments received from council, whether it's parkland, whether it's the proposed land use, and so forth, seriously, and certainly there's discussions that go back and forth between staff and the applicant. I think what this does, it will provide I think the intent is to provide further direction, not only to staff, but also to the applicants in terms of what the expectation of the district of Lantzville are when considering any application.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, and again, I think if we go back and use the Dickinson Lot A example, perhaps a better decision would have been not taking the cash and just taking a thin strip of parkland down one, or down the, or adjacent, sorry, to the road right away, and just making it a little wider, just making it more meaningful. So I think, for myself, I would like to see us retain more green. I think it's a way of the future, and it's not all about just clearing everything down to the dirt and then starting the rebuild from there. So I think for myself, I would like to see us retain more parkland, and also in the form of treed parkland. That would be a definite bonus, because there's nothing worse than getting an area that's just covered in stumps. So that's for a different discussion, I suppose. But nonetheless, I think this is heading in the right direction. So that's all I have to say about that at this point. So unless there's anything further, I'll move to calling the question. Councillor Savage, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to bring this point up because it's extremely important. This map in the OCP is just one tiny part of the OCP's reference to trails, green corridors, and a network of trails. It's full of justification to have public green space anywhere in the community. There's nothing about the OCP that limits it. The 2008 Parks Plan that this map was based on, plus I added some stars during the OCP process, says right in it that these stars and so on are not meant to limit the areas of park or trails. The age-friendly document we spent $15,000 on is chock full of references to have trails everywhere. So there's many documents that support getting parkland anywhere, anytime. And so it's really important, I think, to know that, and in no way, shape, or form does this map at the end of the OCP limit parkland, and we can change it if it does, but it simply doesn't. It's up to us, so thank you.
Okay, unless there's anything further, Councillor Jones.
Yes, I think this is discussions that we're having is leading to tying in space that Cash and Lieu has a way of destroying, and I'm referring to natural assets, and in most cases, those are the trees that are coming down that could be park space. But as we move forward, I hope that we will start putting a value onto that, so we'll be able to actually say how much money we're saving this community by keeping park space treed rather than cutting it down. And I also just want to reiterate what I think Councillor Savage has said, which is that any park green space should be tying into a greater network throughout this community so that people can bike, people can walk, and nature can move where they need to go. And that work has not been done yet. It certainly will be a high priority to get these greenways and trails laid out, and that will help us identify as well as save valuable park space. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to move to calling the question then. So all those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. All right, so it takes us on to the next item. Expansion of Lantzville Road, new water pipe installation project to include surface access to water. So this is Councillor Savage's recommendation. So through to you, Councillor Savage.
Thank you. This is a good one. That staff provide a report on whether it is possible to include surface access to water for future irrigation and public access to water fountains in the village as part of the new water pipe installation project on Lantzville Road.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Lerner. Discussion on the motion. Through to you, Councillor Savage.
Yes, thank you. This all started with when I was down at the bus shelter spending months where it would have taken someone else a week to build the bus shelter. Anyway, down there, I just observed how hard it is to get an electric plug-in or access to water anywhere in the village. And for me, to make it a friendlier, more resident-friendly village, there should be water outlets and electric outlets for charging phones, for giving a dog a sip of water, washing your hands, any reason. Just have a spigot with the automatic spring on it, so the automatic turn off. So the idea is now that they're installing the new water pipes, I'm wondering if we cannot bring, while the ground's dug up and the water's, the pipes are being put in, if we cannot connect some irrigation to the pipes just so it comes up to the surface, then we can decide at a later date what to do with the access to that water, be it irrigation system, be it so you can attach a hose to it for watering, or attach a fountain or a spigot, whatever. But I really would like to get this going so that walkers regularly can have a water outlet for drinking water, or school kids can, and wash hands or whatever. It's just, it makes it a more pleasant area when you have access to water. And this is a popular walking route down here. And the other reason is I'm hoping, we'll look into it, to get some rest areas along this walking route, which means artisan benches, homemade by artisans, and greenery, so there could be comfortable sitting areas. I've picked out a few with gorgeous views, and it would be nice to have water to be able to hose off the benches now and again, or irrigate the greenery, or allow people to splash water on their face on a hot day, or whatever. It just would be nice. So that's the idea of it. Thank you.
Okay, and the seconder, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I support this motion to get this report. I think it's the fiscally responsible thing to do, to find out about providing future opportunities for access to water now, rather than having to redo and dig up what's already there, or what's being laid down now. I know from experience, I worked to manage a facility where they were bringing a new heating system into the building. They had to dig up huge trenches and put that into the building. And then meanwhile, a building down the road was being built that had to take the same route for construction of pipes, but the two weren't coordinated. And so they dug everything up, put it all back down, sealed it up, cemented it, and then 6 months later, they dug it up again. So that cost a lot more than was necessary, especially since it was the same facility management area. So the ability to plan ahead could save the taxpayers a lot of money. It could provide, as Councillor Savage said, a lot of resources and amenities. So getting this report would be, I think, the right thing to do in future-proofing the project. So thank you.
Okay, additional speakers? Okay, before you, through the rest of the council, first-time speakers. Okay, Councillor Mundell.
I think I can generally support this. I would like to know a little bit more about costs that we might be incurring as a result. But other than that, it sounds like a good idea to have some further. I know Huddlestone has the small water fountain inside the restroom facility, but for some folks who are, as you mentioned, biking and walking the path, they might not know that, or be able to head down there to access it. So yeah, I would be interested to hear more about the costs and what would be involved in getting that going.
And just real briefly, it was, I think this is along similar lines of when Sebastian Road got redone, and they're running the redoing, I think, some of the sewer servicing down there as well. And at that point, I believe they, if I may be wrong, but I think I'm correct here, they may have left a connection for a potential future washroom down there, like a sewer connection. So I think that's correct. Yeah, I'm getting a nod from CO Campbell. So I think it is about good planning, and I don't think a report is going to probably be too onerous on staff to bring us back some options and even give us an idea of what the potential cost is going to look like, because there's always costs to doing these things, but it may be a heck of a lot cheaper to do it now, and even though it may not get hooked up or utilized in a couple of years, but it's always cheaper to do it when the big work is being done, as far as I understand it. So Councillor Savage, go ahead.
Yes, well, since costs have been brought up, we can charge for this water. So what do you think? $5 a liter, and we can make some big money off this.
Well, I'm sure there's technology out there for that, right? You just swipe your card and fill up your water bottle. Okay, so unless there's anything further, I will move to calling the question. Okay, all those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. Okay. All right, that takes us on to the next item. So this is the Lantzville Road Active Transportation Upgrade Ware Road Shook Road Project. This is Councillor Jones' recommendation, so through to Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Yes, that council rescinds its support of the Lantzville Road active transportation upgrades on Ware Road, Shuk Road project. And further, that staff withdraw the application to the British Columbia Active Transportation Grant Program for funding, previously authorized by council on October 26, 2022 for submission.
Okay, Councillor Savage seconding, so Councillor Jones as mover, if you wish.
Yes, thank you. There are several reasons for this motion. One of them is that although potentially we could receive a grant for $500,000, it is estimated today that there will be a cost of $700,000 to the district for this project. And of course, we know cost overruns can generally be expected. So that's a huge chunk of change for what? And that brings me to the second point, which is that there are walkways and bikeways that are proposed in this project, but these are not pathways that have been integrated into a master plan, so it comes back to the need for a plan throughout Lantzville and to see how the priorities of that plan can be best met along this particular route. We just haven't engaged the public in that discussion yet, and we haven't had that discussion amongst ourselves. So I think we can do a lot better in the future when the time comes to do routes along that particular area. The last point I would make is that if $700,000 is going to go into bikeways and walkways, I think we would have to consider that a much higher priority would be routes that take adults and children into the village core and to Seaview School. We've heard a lot from residents about their concerns walking along Lantzville Road. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Savage, if you wish.
Thank you. Thanks to Mr. Scott and Mr. Blood for their input. So you've heard a few reasons from Councillor Jones for this, and for me, I can add some reasons. And with this $700,000, I can just think of higher priorities to spend it. It's from the gas tax, so we're limited to what gas tax can be used for. However, I agree having a well-used route is from the Superior Road to the Village Walk. And the other thing is we need to evaluate road design and drainage systems before we go ahead with this idea, because a decent part of it is road design. They'll be moving some of the road and putting in drainage pipes. And the other thing is there is going to be development right up there in the, as you turn the corner up the hill, Lantzville Road, that whole strip along there. There's already 2 lots slated for, got an application in, so surely we can move some of this pathway and bike route as part of that development, since it's right in front of it. And so those are basically the reasons. However, the work has been done on it, as Mr. Scott points out, and it's still there to use at a later time. I just think for now, it's important that we just focus on priorities. With this much money, get the biggest bang for the buck. So those are my reasons. Thank you.
Additional speakers, Councillor Lerner.
Yes, generally I'm a big fan of grants. It brings in money that the taxpayers here are not necessarily funding. That's one of the things I do for a living, is get grant money. I'm also a big fan of upgrades to infrastructure to keep them running longer. However, what I don't like is when it's major costs overruns when the grant isn't covering everything or is covering less than half. And so $700,000, I know it's the gas tax. There are restrictions on what it can be spent on, but I can think of better scenarios in this instance where it could be spent. And as Councillor Savage said, there's nothing preventing this project from happening again in the future with the plans that have been drawn up. The other thing to note is that, you know, if we were to proceed with the project and then determine that the budget was even higher due to inflation or whatever cost overruns were to happen, it would be concerning to me, as I understand the budget has already increased from where it was originally proposed or requested. So I don't think we would then want to go back to the grantor and backtrack on our application at that point. It's better to do it now, and take a step back, do the master plan, do the priorities of the new council, and then determine how to spend the $700,000. So I can support this motion at this time.
Additional speakers? For myself, this is, you know, I voted in favor of this motion at the time. And, you know, with respect to voting in favor at the time, it's, you know, it's $500,000 of grant money. So if we have an application ready to go and there's no additional work that needs to be done, why not make the submission? I think what we're starting to realize here, or maybe it's a sober second thought, is that sure, if we get the $500,000 of grant funding, we're still on the hook for $700,000, and that gas tax money can be used for lots of different applications. It's very flexible on what we can use, and I think a big part of the reason why the additional costs is when we originally were looking at doing a pathway up to Shook Road and then also going the other way, going down to Superior Road, it was just a multi-use path. It was just to get people off the road. It wasn't including a designated bike lane or anything like that. And since then, in order for us to make the grant application, we had to include bike lanes. So that seems to be one of the main drivers, in addition to upgrading some of the road as well, to bringing the cost way up to what it originally was. But anyways, you know, when we passed it back in October, you know, it was already basically shelf ready and ready to go. It was just a matter of giving the final approval to go ahead and make application. But I don't, if this council is not serious about spending $700,000 if we were to be successful, I think it looks pretty bad on us. So we're better off to cancel the application now in its early stage and not waste any of the ministry's time on dealing with this than to turn it down after it's been accepted. I think that looks really bad on us. And it's okay to have sober second looks at things and change priorities. But at the point in October where this was adopted, or not adopted, it was passed, you know, really it was ready to go. And it's just, well, why not? And now we're hearing a lot of why we shouldn't. So, and generally I'm in agreement with that, because I can say right now, I can't support spending $700,000. You know, there's going to be lots of competing priorities. We got phase 2 of the village core improvement coming our way. You know, there has been a tremendous amount of time that's transpired since we originally applied for that grant. So you can rest assured it's going to come in way over what we originally budgeted. I'd be shocked, you know, take a pie in the face if I'm wrong in this, and you can do it in town center if you wish. But I don't think, you know, it's going to seriously be any cheaper. We're going to probably see some serious cost overruns on that, and we'll be in a tough spot even then, because, yeah, sure enough, we're going to be getting, what is it, over $500,000 of grant money there, or about $500,000. But what are we going to have to pay to get that? And that's always a tough decision when we have so many competing interests in our small community with limited funds. So something we'll have to wrestle and figure out as we go. But to take on another $700,000, like, I think we seriously have to get real about this. Anyway, and we also have strategic priorities sessions coming up, or planning. That's going to basically set the course for the next 4 years. So, you know, do we want to, and I think Councillor Savage maybe indicated this, maybe if I'm wrong, but it's really approving a trail that takes people to Nanaimo, not necessarily coming into our village. So I would like to see people from the Leland Peterson subdivisions coming into the village and traveling along a path there as opposed to a path that essentially takes people up the road to Nanaimo. So anyways, those are some of my thoughts, but I clearly, I'll be supporting the motion, which is written in the negative, but Councillor Mundell?
Just a question through you to staff. Is 500,000 the max that this grant provides? Or is there any further amount that we can request from this grant?
Through you, your worship, I'm not sure, but I think it is, but not absolutely sure at this point.
Okay. And is it possible to combine and get two grants to get work done on a project such as this? Are there any other grants?
Your worship, again, typically you can't do that.
No.
Have a grant support another grant. So no, the answer is probably no.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, my sentiments are similar. You hear the terms inflation, recession, and people get nervous and their taxes have already gone up significantly in the last term. So I think we do need to be really careful and fiscally responsible with our spending. So yeah, maybe this is a project for another day. I love biking. Biking's my passion, so I fully support bike lanes. But I also understand that, $700,000 is a lot of taxpayer money, so thank you.
Councillor Lerner?
Yes, so just through your worship or anyone else who may recall, what was the original amount that was projected for a project like this before we started considering the grant with the bike lanes?
I think it was 845,000, if I am not mistaken.
Depends on how far you go back. So I remember it was either 200 or 400,000 for the multi-use paths. I don't know if Councillor Savage can remember, but it was significantly less when we first started this concept of having multi-use paths going basically again up to up Lantzville Road to Shook and then going the other way to Superior, and now it's morphed into what we have in front of us, which is a $1.2 million trail that only does half of it. So part of it is definitely cost overruns and so on, but also just the to make this application, we had to include the bike component, the active transportation component. So that's part of the reason why there's the cost or significant increase in costs.
So that was one of my questions because, it makes sense to get a $500,000 grant to do 200 or 500,000 of extra work, but to get a $500,000 grant to do 800,000 of extra work, the grant's actually putting you in the negative. I mean, yes, you get the bike lane out of it, but it's actually causing overruns. So I do support this motion.
Councillor Savage?
Last two quick points. One is that this grant is available again next October. So all we're doing is delaying it by 1 year. But it's certainly better to withdraw it now and try again next year. I agree with Mayor Swain. It looks terrible if you get it and then don't accept it. So, and that's true. It's when it was passed. You see, we didn't have the price, so you can just get general rough estimates, and they were very low, a few $100,000, as I recall, some years ago, or a couple of years ago. And so when this grant came up, you see, when we okayed applying for it, we didn't have a price, which makes sense because you don't do all the work to find out of exact cost until you get the okay from council. So we heard for the first time just a short while ago the cost. That's why the changing of minds for me anyway. Thank you.
And again, like we will have our strategic planning sessions coming up, and we'll be setting our strategic priorities for the term. But the one thing I look at as well is we have the Pierce Woods Marine Park, and if we spend wildly elsewhere, we will have nothing left for that. So we have to, we will be making some tough decisions and where we're going to put the money, but at the end of the day, we just can't keep adding on more and more projects. And to me, this is adding on a project because it's going to cost us significantly to see it through. You know, if this was going to be largely funded through development, or it's going to be largely funded through the grant, great. But you know, 500,000, you know, when we have to put out 700,000, just doesn't add up for me. So, and I'm sure it wouldn't add up for a lot of residents either. That won't probably ever touch it. So, all right. So I'm going to move to call in question. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. That takes us on to our next item. So this is Council Procedure Bylaw and Committee of the Whole meetings. Councilor Lerner has a recommendation. So through to you, Councilor Lerner.
Thank you. Whereas extensive communication and in-depth analysis is a vital part of council business, especially to ensure the best outcomes for the district, and Committee of the Whole meetings provide for such opportunities, therefore be it resolved that staff provide an amendment to the council procedure bylaw that would allow for Committee of the Whole meetings for council's consideration at the November 30th, 2022 regular council meeting.
Okay, do we have a seconder to this? Seconded by Councilor Savage. Discussion on motion. So through to you, Councilor Lerner.
Yes, thank you. Well, as I outlined in my beautifully crafted whereas clause, I love those whereas clauses. This is an opportunity to provide, it's an opportunity for council to discuss matters without necessarily advancing business, but to provide input to one another, to make recommendations that would later come before council. It's used extensively. I think I included a brief report in there where it's used in other communities at the provincial level, other communities on the island, such as the city of Duncan. This is an opportunity for a new council as well to work together more closely. One of the things that was recommended by staff was that I include a schedule of what I thought would be potential meeting dates. Now, this motion is simply to bring forward a bylaw for consideration, so there would be time to amend it. Page 127 of the agenda has that. Now, the only problem is I put the dates in orange and the statutory holidays are in yellow, and when it photocopied, they came out the same color. So basically, we could probably decide on the actual schedule when we're looking at the bylaw, but I do have a copy if people want to look with the appropriate colors. But essentially, it was recommending once a month, except for August when we don't usually meet, December when we don't usually meet, and October when we're already very, very busy. So this is essentially the recommendation that it would be on a Wednesday once a month at the same sort of time that we usually meet. When you're looking at the calendar, the yellows that are not statutory holidays are the yellows that I'm recommending. But I do have a copy with the orange here. If anyone wants to have a look, I can pass that around. But essentially, I believe this is an opportunity for us to work together more closely, to provide input to one another, to have fulsome discussions, and not to be constrained in that way. And it is a process that's used in governments all over the province. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Savage.
Yes, thank you. So we do need to revamp our entire procedure bylaw. However, we first need the structure of a committee of the whole meeting to discuss things like the revamping of a procedure bylaw, if we want to have a look at other bylaws, be it the OCP or zoning, whatever it is. This allows you to flesh out your the whole thing, spend your entire meeting just on one thing, so you can really fully vet it is the key. So that's why this is a one-off with our procedure one, but it's a necessary one-off because our first committee of the whole meeting may be on revamping the procedure bylaw. So I fully support it. It's just its history. We always had one going way back to incorporation, I believe. But it was removed last term, the committee of the whole. So I think it's time to restore it now, and it's there. We don't have to use it, but as long as it's there, we wouldn't be allowed to now as the key. So that's all we're doing. So I'll certainly support it.
Okay, through to the rest of the council. Okay, so I'll go ahead, Councilor Jones, and then I'll speak.
Yes, just very briefly to say, I feel these are very important. One thing I've learned from this first, 2 weeks or so on council is that we do not have a way to come together and discuss things in detail. And that is very important. We have a community here that's passionate about the community going forward, and we want to be as supportive as that as possible. And we simply need to be able to hash out the details and talk about them. So I look forward to committee of the whole meetings. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll speak next, and this might create a bit more discussion. So as laid out now, I won't be supporting the motion. Just simply because, to have this considered for the 30th is too soon, in my opinion. And especially if we're going to be looking at an amendment to the council procedure bylaw. The council procedure bylaw is something this council will have to take a serious look at, and whether or not we want to make any amendments to it, including a section on committee of the whole meetings and the necessary details around holding committee of the whole meetings. As laid out in the schedule that Councillor Lerner has produced. It's probably safe to say there'd be at least 10 committee of the whole meetings a year, because I'm looking at nothing but yellow on my sheet. But there'd probably be about 10, and that does create a fair bit of work for staff, especially if we're going to be looking at potentially creating other committees or having other committees resume. So it can be quite onerous. I do believe the committee of the wholes have their place. Obviously, I was part of the last council that voted to get rid of them, but I also sat on the RDN board last term for a portion of it. And the RDN board continues to do committee of the wholes, but just not as frequently, as they kind of use them as a tool to get into more open discussions about particular items or limited items. But for the most part, as most of you heard on this week at the RDN orientation session, the board basically does all meetings through board meetings and by resolution, similar to or exactly the same as what we do here. The problem with that is, like Councillor Jones has already indicated, is it doesn't allow to get into the weeds as much as we want to, especially even like a council procedure bylaw, because then you're limited by your rules. So right now, it's a 5-minute speaking time. If we're going to hold each other accountable to that, the RDN has a 3-minute speaking time. So it doesn't lend well to having a discussion about certain items that definitely warrant discussion. So, and that's one of the things I've personally found frustrating about just having nothing but council meetings and doing everything by resolution, because it can stifle the conversation. And especially in areas where we need to have much greater discussion and conversation. So, I definitely support this. I'd be more in favor of why not just have this move it along to a time, maybe early January, where we can actually look at this. We still have strategic planning to get through. And part of that is probably going to be one of our priorities will be revamping the entire council procedure bylaw. And it's something we should do anyways. Yeah, so, there's some thoughts anyways. And in terms of having even a discussion around revamping the council procedure bylaw, we can suspend our rules. So, by consent of council, we can suspend our rules and have as big of a discussion as we want and not worry about making motions and this and that, extending speaking times and so on. So we can do that with a council meeting. It's just not good practice, right, to do it with every meeting. So, if we want to, at a later date, look at the entire council procedure bylaw, including committee of the whole, having that addition, that's probably the best time to do it. So I could ramble all night on this, but I'll cut it off there. Councillor Mundell, I think you got your hand up.
I want to make an amendment then, amendment motion.
Well, Councillor
Okay, sure.
Mundell had her hand up
Councillor
first,
Lerner had his hand up first, so I was just.
but he's already spoken, so.
Fair enough, fair enough. Okay, my question actually, either for you, Mayor, or staff, would be just similar to what you just touched on, is I also feel the weight of extra meetings and extra time, but at the same time, so again, two minds, I'll take one of your terms. I'm of two minds here where I recognize that there aren't those opportunities to have those discussions as fulsomely as I would like. So I feel like I'm stymied a bit that way. So I recognize the value of reintroducing this type of meeting. But again, I look at the calendar and go, okay, that's another date out of the evenings or out of the month that, again, staff will have to take time, and we all will have to take time as well away from obligations and family time as well. So I'm a little torn here. What my question actually was going to be, obviously we have a lot going on right now, and it's not necessarily the best time to consider this, but can we maybe take a look at changing some of our regular council meetings to a committee of the whole meeting? No, we just we don't have the
And
bandwidth
so,
for that.
so I'll just speak to it real quick. So the main reason why is it's not in our council procedure bylaw. Committee of the whole meetings do not exist in Lantzville until such time they're included back in the council procedure bylaws. So we just can't willy-nilly change meetings, you know. We can cancel meetings and add new meetings, but those are all council meetings. And then just a further comment, you know, we don't want to be doing multiple amendments to the same bylaw. So the council procedure bylaw, if we're going to reopen the council procedure bylaw, let's do it all at one time. Because again, coming back and taking additional kicks at it creates more work, essentially. So, Director Coates.
I support that idea. It's a big undertaking, but it is expected that in each term, the council, after they have had some experience using the procedure bylaw, that we will set aside at least one meeting where they're going to review the council procedure bylaw. So the fact that we don't have a committee of the whole structure does not mean that you can't have a meeting dedicated to looking at one item and have a fulsome discussion. I mean, that happens. I think what you want to do at this point is communicate out through the mayor or the mayor to staff that you want to have a meeting dedicated for X or for Y, and maybe it's even 2 items on an agenda. Where the challenge is by you need regular council meetings for regular business, but we recognize that there will be times where you need a special meeting to focus on something or perhaps 2 things. But for a special meeting, it has to be predetermined, it has to be in the agenda. It isn't like a regular meeting where there's a series and things can be added, like a special meeting's for that purpose. So there's certainly a way to do it. But you know, staff would recommend that you work with the procedure bylaw for a bit first, try out having a special meeting on a topic, see how that works for you. As the mayor said, you can suspend the rules, and people, there's never really been a problem with how long people talk at a special meeting on a subject. But again, you want the meetings to be effective, and you know, with the good chair that you have, he would make sure that everybody's getting a turn and an appropriate amount of time is spent on an item.
Okay, so Councillor, right, have you, I don't know if you've spoken, Councillor Jones? I believe I have. Okay, so, yes, I just couldn't remember. Sorry. Councillor Lerner.
Thank you. In this case, I'm just pointing out the fact that the schedule that was included was not meant to be set in stone. This was a motion to bring forward amendment to the bylaw for us to consider. With that, the schedule, we could have in the bylaw if we wanted it to amend it at the time that the committee of the whole, it meets a minimum of twice a year or once a year, and that we call meetings ad hoc. It doesn't need to be that we're necessarily adhering specifically to that schedule, but right now we're heavily constrained in and how this is how I perceive it in our abilities when we're having these meetings to follow very specific procedures. We cannot meet and have fulsome discussions the way I feel we need to. The procedure bylaw, yes, we can have a meeting to discuss the procedure bylaw, but there are plenty of other really important things that we as a new council will need to discuss and set our priorities. And the purpose of the committee of the whole is to do that. And to have those discussions and have them properly facilitated. So at this time, I feel this is sort of an urgent change to the procedure bylaw. And then in the future, we can revisit the procedure bylaw and do a more fulsome review. But at this time, I believe committee of the whole is more urgent. And this is a motion to bring forward a change to that bylaw, which we can then judge and either approve or reject at that time on the 30th. Thank you.
Okay, so I have Councillor Jones and then myself.
Yes, I like options. I think options are good, and not having the option for a committee of the whole meeting has some serious drawbacks to it. One of them is that the committee of the whole meeting is one time where ideas that haven't previously come to mind, been put forward for motions or for special meetings, can come up and be discussed. So I do feel that's very important, especially at this time when the priorities are likely to be quite different from what they have been in the past. So it's certainly a possibility. As for some of the concerns about timing, additional time being required, I would assume that it's not mandatory that all on council be at every single meeting. So if there is a real difficulty there for whatever reason, whether it be work or grandkids or who knows, we would have an option. And I would also imagine that it's possible for us to redo the schedule and not have as many of them if we feel that they aren't necessary. And as for it being additional staff time, understand that that would be the case. Can't see any solution to that, but very much appreciated because I think this is important that we have this means of communication. Thank you.
Okay. I'm not going to try to be too repetitive here, but I think, council has to keep in mind where we're at in terms of, we're just beginning our term. We have to go through our strategic planning sessions and so forth. And soon enough, we will be going right into this, council procedure bylaw full tilt and looking at all aspects of it. In the meantime, there are tools at our disposal to simply just continue on with what we have and make it work. In terms of committee of the wholes, sure, they're great for, having more open-ended discussions and not having time constraints and so forth. But in terms of the mechanics of them, like I don't know if council realizes, what we do in committee of the wholes, but essentially you're essentially making recommendations back to council as a body. So no business really advances except for you're making recommendations back to you as council or council as a body to do something or maybe action it. So then it goes on to the next regular meeting or council meeting agenda. So whatever the topic is. Like I said, this council has tools at its disposal right now, and if the council so desires, or it's the will of council to utilize those tools, then we won't have any problems until such time we get to that place where we take a serious look at the council procedure bylaw and whether or not we want to have committee of the wholes in there. For myself, I would like to have that option, to have the committee of the wholes as an option. To be used similar as how with the way the RDN uses them, and that's at their discretion. So it's not a set schedule. It's similar to calling a special meeting. It would just be calling a committee of the whole meeting instead. But I think in the meantime, we have the tools in place to do what I think I'm hearing tonight to get it done and have whatever discussion. So, for instance, even at the beginning of this motion, someone could have made the motion to suspend the rules. And we could have as long of a debate about this as we wanted to have. And then right now we're kind of by unanimous consent as council because nobody's objecting. We're already having that conversation. Nobody's really following speaking times. I'm not monitoring, but we're having a bit of an open-ended discussion about where we're going with this. So I think if we trust the process and know what tools are available to us, I think the best course of action would be just simply to refer this to down the road to when we're going to reopen the entirety of the council procedure bylaw, because there's a lot of changes we probably have to look at within that. And again, you know, opening it and making amendments to it, there is a process, right? We have to do the 3 readings. I think we have to allow for public input, and then we got to pass it, and then we got to do that all over again.
And we also have to publish notice
Yeah.
for a 2-week period.
Yeah. So there's lots of steps involved, and you know, for myself, I'd rather do it all as one package, and then if it's not working after 6 months, and then we can look at reopening it again at that point. But I do believe we've got the right tools in place to make it work, because I believe we have a amenable council sitting at this table, and we'll honor that. So, but it's really up to the body. What do you guys, you know, essentially what does council want to do? So, Councillor Savage, go ahead.
Yes, maybe if you're a council that does all their business outside of public meetings, then you don't need meetings. But that's not us. I feel this is urgent myself. I've been through special meetings, I've been through regular meetings, and I've seen cow meetings. And for me, cow meetings are the only way to fully vet. And the perfect example is the procedure bylaw. If we want to change it, you do it all at a cow meeting, so you can go through it slowly and thoroughly. At special meetings, it has to be for exactly that topic with no string off the topic and so on. So, and there's a number of other things. We're getting trial by fire here. The first day after inauguration, we face the clear cutting of what I consider the prize property in Lower Lantzville. And then I'm seeing on Village South, there's great concern from residents about what's going on there with drainage works going on and so on. There could be subdivisions in the wings where we have no say in them. That's the approval officer that handles those. And we may need policies in place. The cash in lieu is just one. And other policies where we make sure that what we want as a council happens, and all this for me happens in cow meetings. I find it's a very simple procedure. We've done so many other things that can be very simple. You just change that one, and then it's done. It's not that onerous. I don't think in a public input anyone would care if we add a cow meeting to our meetings, but I see no downside to this and only upsides. So if something urgent comes up, the way it's generally been done in the past is the cow meetings are assigned during a council meeting, and you just set the date for it, and that's it, it's done. So I feel it is important, even if we don't use this time, that it's there if we need it. So if something fairly urgent comes up, that we can just call a full meeting and, flesh it out and so on. But the way I look at it is we've got too many things upcoming, and it's too important that we get these procedures in place. As I say, it could be zoning, it could be community plan, it could be procedure bylaw, it could be this delegation and authority bylaw, although that's not a big one. But a lot of stuff coming up, we want to perhaps get our legislation in place so we're covered. We're not always reacting to these things. So I think that's why it's very timely and important. And I find there's no downside to it. It's just putting one phrase in the procedure bylaw. I don't believe there's a public hearing for that. Mayor Swain, I think.
Yes, so essentially any amendment to our council procedure bylaw will have to go through 3 readings. There's public hearing, has to be advertised. Is there a public hearing or just public
It's
input?
not technically called a
No,
public
that's
hearing,
right.
but it is a requirement that we
Yeah,
advertise it
advertise.
for 2 weeks. And so, yeah, no, there's a process to amending a procedure bylaw. And at the end of it, you would have the ability to have a committee of the whole meeting on a specific topic, or you could choose to have a special council meeting on a specific topic and talk for the same length of time.
forgive me, I've witnessed this past summer seeing mammoth things going through at record speed. So forgive me if I find this the lightest thing you could possibly do, which is just simply adding CAL meetings to a procedure bylaw. And when it comes up, there may be a few other amendments to make, but that's, I think, for another time. But anyway, that's my point of view. I really support this. Thank you.
Okay, I'll speak again. I don't know if I'm going to change any point of views there, but I'm not really going to work too hard at trying to do that. But I just wanted to point out, though, like for even a discussion like we're having right now, you know, during a council meeting, if it didn't seem like this was the time or place for it, then we could refer it to a future COW meeting to have a more fulsome discussion rather than, you know, having that discussion during a council meeting where we're trying to move business along. So we have an agenda, we got a lot of business on there, we're trying to move it along. But if members of council or a majority of council felt otherwise, like, oh, we don't have enough information or we need to have more discussion, then you could kick it to a COW meeting. And that's kind of how they're used. And similarly, if you wanted to have items go on to a COW meeting, it's no different to a council meeting. You can have that requested to go on to a COW meeting and have those discussions there. And then at the end of it, you're essentially making a recommendation back to council on what to do. So then you could, with that recommendation back in the council meeting, action the business item. So I don't know if it's going to achieve what I'm hearing this evening. You know, again, if there's concerns that need immediate attention, then the proper procedure for that would be call a special council meeting. 2 members of council can do it. You know, or I can call it. My preference is always bring it to my attention. I'll call it. It's not a big deal. Even if I 100% disagree with it, I'll still call it. Because I do believe members of council deserve the right to be heard, even if it's on topics I may not necessarily agree with. So, again, I don't know if this is achieving what I think councillors want it to achieve, but unless there's anything further, I will move to calling the question. Actually, I did have one question for staff, and in terms of the timeline that's set for this, November 30th, does staff feel that has enough time? Because I know there's other things on Director Coates' plate as well as Deputy Director Richardson's plate, and that might be a tight timeline to turn something around, even though it seems like a minor amendment. So through to Director Coates, not to put you on the spot, but does it seem reasonable that you have enough time to fulfill this requirement?
It would be tight. We've got a couple statutory things we're working on right now. But certainly if it's council's priority, it's our priority.
Sure, thank you for that. All right, okay, so it sounds like the timeline would be met. So unless there's anything further for staff or for debate, I will move to call in the question. All right, call in the question. All those in favor? And noting Mayor Swain's opposed, carries. All right, so that takes us on to, my eyes are going now, geez. Options for surveying for resident input for engagement, and this is Councillor Mundell's recommendation, so through to Councillor Mundell.
Yes, that staff research and present 3 options of surveying tools that would be comprehensive in obtaining the input of residents regarding council matters. Suggest and provide methods of strategies to target and improve Lantzville resident engagement, and to provide a report on the December 7th, 2022 council agenda on the proceeding.
Do we have a seconder? Second by Councillor Lerner. Discussion on the motion, so go ahead, Councillor Mundell.
Sorry, I have to try and skip through my iPad to my notes. But I think we can all recall discussions during our election around improving engagement. And I just feel for me that's still a very big priority. I want to collect input from our residents in a way that is comprehensive and also allows people with you know, different schedules and different abilities to participate, to have their voice heard and to have input into some of the decisions that we're bringing up, we're discussing and making decisions on. And I feel like, and I've seen a few things I've received even through the RDN where they're using different tools to get information. So I know these tools exist, and I think we could address some of the engagement gaps that we have by using an online surveying system. So I'm hoping staff can help me out and find some options.
And through the seconder,
Yes, I support this motion. I think it's an important part of the democratic process, and I know that it can be difficult and intimidating for people to find the time to come to speak in council chambers for every single issue, as well as, you know, to have the public speaking. This isn't meant to replace public input period or public hearing periods. It's just meant to provide another option to collect information and data from the public. One thing I'd like to add is is that there is the RDN tools, as Councillor Mundell mentioned. And I believe that as a member of the RDN, we sometimes get to share resources. So maybe one of the recommendations that could come forward is ways that we can use the RDN's surveying tools as a member of the RDN. There could be some cost-effective ways to do this. And just getting the report for December 7th, I think, is very timely because we're in the budget process. We're also going through the priority process in January, and so just knowing what our options are, you know, and then we will know whether we want to proceed and how we want to proceed if we do. So I think it's a timely matter that could set the stage for the next year. So I think it's very important. Thank you.
okay, additional speakers on this item? Okay, Director Coates.
Just for additional information for preparing the report, would item 2 include if we were proposing some options or strategies that are not online? Because the online tools are very expensive. And, you know, we participate in the regional communications group. You know, they're regularly comparing how many staff they have. And we're just not in that league. You know, we do it off the corner of our desk, and we're talking about tools that are being used by municipalities and regional districts where they have, you know, a 3-person communications department plus a large budget for the software. So there are other more, what am I trying to say? I don't want to say sticks and stones sort of options where, you know, people would have events, and they would have a town hall meeting on a topic, or they would invite people to we called them World Cafe models, where there'd be different topics at different tables where people could come and give input that way, or charrette. Charrettes used to be popular, that you would have a topic and then they'd meet and go over this part of the problem and then meet again in a week and go over another part of the problem. So I just don't know if there's any appetite for that type of an option. Certainly we can prepare and provide the costs and the staffing that would be required for the other options, but sometimes we have to look at simpler options too.
Yeah, so I was going to speak, but actually go ahead, Councillor Jones, and then I'll throw my 2 cents out there.
Thank you, Mayor Swain. Going around door knocking in the part of campaigning, heard and saw a variety of ways that residents were comfortable and able to engage. And some people just want to quickly give in their opinions so that they're heard, and others may want to talk for 20 minutes. Some can use computers with the greatest of ease, and others prefer not to. And a lot of them don't like Facebook. That was just my reaction there. But I would hope that looking at an online way doesn't mean we have to go the way of the big, huge communities with their sophisticated software. Perhaps staff can dig down that rabbit hole a bit and see if there's a way, maybe even using the district website to get a survey, a simple survey tool out there. So I am very much in favor of that. It is a way of resident engagement I feel we need to look to. Times are changing and things are going very the way of, the technology. So that doesn't exclude other means of communication and having resident engagement. So just to recognize that, I'm sure we'll be digging into those as well as we try to get better transparency and engagement with residents. Thank you.
Okay, for myself, yeah, this is, I appreciate Councillor Mundell bringing this one forward. I think everybody here sitting at this table would really like to have residents engaged and giving their input. The tricky part is how do we get input? And I can speak, I don't have the exact numbers, so I'm not gonna speak too passionately about this, but, with respect to like our large organizations like the RDN and I think the city of Nanaimo for that matter, they'll do engagement, the technological engagement, we'll call it. And they get, in my opinion, fairly low numbers. When you look at the RDN region of what, 130,000 people or whatever it is, and you're getting like maybe 100 respondents. Yeah, that's not very good, right? Or it might be 200. Even if it was 500, that's still pretty low for for a large area. So I don't know what the correct answer to this is. My first thoughts shift towards, what are other smaller communities doing with limited staff, and how are they engaging their residents? And the one thing I know with Lantzville is, typically speaking, whenever we do something in person, we tend to get people coming out. Seems to be the Lantzville way. But if we start to go too techie on this, I think we're going to have possibly the opposite reaction, where people start dropping off and becoming less, and will become less engaged. So I think there's got to be a way of utilizing our resources and our time, and to get the best engagement. And like I said, my first thoughts turn towards, what are other small communities doing that are relatively successful? And I'd even look at, what does a place like Cumberland do, in terms of trying to get engagement, and maybe other, smaller, desirable communities in the interior, like what do they do? How do they get people to come out and give their input and engagement? And my experience in Lantzville thus far is, generally speaking, when you invite people into the building or into the house or whatever you want to call it, they come. So I don't know if we have to look all that hard at solutions, but I don't think that, maybe there are some techie kind of things like SurveyMonkey and a few things like that, which are really cheap and easier to administer to get, quick, get some quick data back. Maybe that's what we have to look at. But I think the tried and true concept in Lantzville is having people, come to events. The one thing I would really like to get underway this term is the whole concept of town hall meetings. And I've heard from the former mayor of Qualicum, they had great success with that concept, having town hall meetings. And it's a way of filling the building and getting a lot of feedback. And on the way out, people can fill out feedback forms or whatever. But we have to look at, the quick and easy and methods of doing it that give us the best bang for our buck and time, right? Because a lot of our time as council, goes into this as well. So, Director Coates.
The other one that's been steady and successful in Qualicum Beach is the community survey, the life satisfaction survey. They do it annually. They budget for that. It's not cheap, but it is by a survey company by phone. So they have a standard. They spend a lot of time picking the standard questions that would be put into it. But I know you didn't want to, provide the report tonight, so I don't think you need. I need to say any more on it, but I just wanted to get a feel for whether it's okay if we put some other options in besides online.
Well, for myself, I'd be totally fine with that. And ultimately, if council's not satisfied or whatever, you're probably going to hear the feedback. But I think for Lantzville, when was the last citizens survey? I think it was like 2012.
During the OCP.
Well, prior
it's
to
not
that.
so much a satisfaction one, is it?
But when was, you might know, Councillor Savage, the last.
I'll answer that in my speaking, sure.
Okay, sure thing. Okay.
It's on my list.
So I think, were you next and then Counselor Mundell? Okay, so go ahead, Counselor Savage.
Oh, thank you. So those were good points, Mayor Swain, that sometimes I've completely overlooked. Sometimes the simplest solutions are right in front of you. But it's just that what I've been hearing from this person, that person over the past few years, oh, how come we don't have an electronic system that gives us participation and so on? But you're right, sometimes just the simplest of ways, the round table and so on. So the two surveys I was thinking of, Councillor Mundell. One was the Beach Road End survey. We hired VIU students to do that. I don't know how they gathered their information, but they did a survey on Beach Road End, some of which was very valuable. They rated the top things people wanted, bike racks and so on. So they were done in that format, multiple choice. And the other one was not too long ago was the business home business situation in the zoning bylaw. And there was a survey, and I'm not quite sure how it was done, but I believe it was electronic. And you could fill out the questions, like, for example, what size property do you feel is appropriate for a mechanic's shop, if there was one, automotive repair, and you had a choice of 1 acre, half acre, and so on, that sort of thing. So both of those were very informative to me. I wouldn't have guessed how people would have answered, and the responses were 50, 60, and people on some. So that gives you a really good indication of, all those that didn't participate. So those are certainly an option too, but the round tables are really one of my favorites, where you sit and discuss things at a table. Each table reports in what the people at the table said, and then you compile it all on a big sheet, and there's your input. You get the general consensus that way. And the OCP survey was a good one. That was done a mail out. It was about 30%, a little more response rate. So anyway, I like this. I'll certainly support it any way that we can find, I guess, is the answer to get public input, and easy public input. I really liked our traveling table during the election, so we could set up tables at different neighborhoods and have people drop by. What are the concerns in your neighborhood? What do you think of this? So thank you.
I think for the OCP survey is 37% response, which is pretty decent, so, yeah. Counselor Mundell, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I actually feel that the turnout for a lot of the in-person events wasn't as good as I was hoping. There were many events that I went to where I was the only one there, or me and my next door neighbor were the only ones who showed up for one whole section of the age-friendly in person. And then I also think too that the roundtable discussions, and I know I brought that up also in my during the election, that I would like to have them restarted as well. And I do think that they're important, but I do think there's a lot of residents who won't be able to participate in those either due to obligations. And certainly the OCP, when it was being drafted, for somebody like me to commit to that many times or meetings for that length of time with young children would be a very big challenge. And I think that's a chunk or a piece of demographic that we're missing out on. So I'm just trying to find ways that we can comprehensively get input from everyone. Whether that be exploring different options with and hearing about what other communities are doing. Happy to hear that, absolutely. It doesn't necessarily have to be this high-tech survey system. I just want to find ways where people can feel like, yep, I had my say, or I had a way of being heard, and I felt like I had input into the process. So by all means, if staff is able to come back with some alternative options and suggestions, I'm happy to hear them.
Counselor Jones.
Yes, I can definitely support this, and the reason is that it's inclusive and it's fair. And those, what I'm referring to is that if you have something at Coston Hall, which, you know, certainly can be an excellent way to get feedback, that doesn't include everybody. There are many people who, especially in this time of COVID and, you know, germs all over the place, just aren't wanting to go and be in with large public gatherings. So we need to pick up the input for those people and the many others that don't want to come to a hall. And the second reason is that, well, further to that, actually, when you have a large people together in one place, it tends to be the ones that are most comfortable in large groups that will be the loudest. So you'll hear often from the, you know, a smaller subset of people. So I feel that a survey becomes a very fair way because you don't have to be bold with your speaking skills. You don't have to be comfortable in a large hall. And I think you get the idea of what I'm saying. So I could certainly support this as a step, along with the other ideas that have been tossed around. Thank you.
Councillor Lerner.
Thank you. Yes, one of the things I like about this motion is it doesn't just say one option, it lists 3 options, and I think those could run the gamut from in-person to online. I'm hoping at least one of them would be online, and I'm sure council would welcome notes on the report that would detail other options and areas we might go. The reason is we may want to implement different options for different tasks. So, for example, when we're dealing with planning for parks or for various neighborhoods, it would make sense to have an in-person meeting with roundtable discussions. On the other hand, if we were trying to find out a simple statistic, like how many cars per household in order to plan for parking and roads, or how many pets per household in order to plan for community facilities, it wouldn't make sense to have an in-person meeting where 100 people stand up and say a number one at a time, right? So this is an opportunity where a simple survey tool, even the Survey Monkey that was mentioned, something very straightforward that would allow for simple collection of data when we're planning something. So I think this is a wonderful motion, and I'll gladly support it.
And most importantly, does staff have enough direction? Okay, good. All right, so unless there's anything further, I will call the question. Okay, all those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. That takes us on to the next item, which is the request for access to records application fee. This is Councillor Lerner's recommendation, so through to Councillor Lerner.
Thank you. That staff provide a draft bylaw for council consideration to amend District of Lantzville Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Bylaw number 109/2014 to strike 6(1). An applicant making a request shall pay to the district a non-refundable application fee of $10. This application fee does not apply to request for the applicant's own personal information.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Savage. Discussion on the motion. Through to you, Councillor Lerner.
Thank you. Yes. In this case, I did not opt for a whereas clause. I opted for a dissertation. You can find it on page 130 of the agenda. It's lengthy, but there's footnotes in case you want to visit the specific links later. But basically, what this is outlining is that when this started being done across the province, there was sort of an outcry from advocacy groups, whether it's the BC Civil Liberties Association or some of the minority communities, the freedom of the press. We live in a small community with a limited amount of small press, and it places an undue burden on them, in my opinion, to have to pay $10 each time for the fees. Also, additionally, I feel that it, as do many of these organizations, it provides an intimidating barrier for some people who are on limited income, who are from marginalized communities. I understand that you know, there are costs involved with the FOI requests, but from what I understand, we're still able to pass on the majority of those costs. It's the initial $10 fee that I believe will intimidate people, especially on limited incomes, and I feel that this is an important part of the transparency of the process for everyone to be able to have free freedom of information. So the $10 fee I don't see as providing a major influx to the coffers of Lantzville, but I do see it as an impediment to some people. And so I believe that this is an important motion. Thank you so much.
Councillor Savage,
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
and through to the rest of the council. Okay. Director Coates.
Yes, just so staff has, or council has full information, staff would be remiss if we didn't share that this amendment occurred after the province amended their legislation to provide for the minimum $10. I believe the purpose was to reduce the number of, I don't want to say just repeat, because some people who apply repeatedly have good reason for applying. And I don't want to say frivolous, but it's something in between there, where they had people who would apply and they thought that if there was a $10 fee, maybe that would cause them to think for a minute. The comment about we already pass on a majority of those costs is based on, I'm not sure what information, because in fact, the costs that we are able to assess do not cover anywhere near the cost to the taxpayer for us to provide this service. But we are limited by the provincial regulation that says we cannot charge a fee for the first 3 hours of a search. And once we can charge a fee, the maximum fee we can charge is $7.50 per 15 minutes. So the cost of our time in processing at our hourly rate is much higher than someone's paying for it. And it's not the applicant, it is the taxpayer.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. You know, and just based on hearing that, I think if it became a problem, right, then I would say, you know, staff would probably have to bring that to the attention of council and say, we have a problem. We seem to have a lot of frivolous FOI requests, and it's eating up an inordinate amount of time. So, but until such time, I would agree with Councillor Lerner that waiving the $10 fee may, for some, remove a barrier to accessing, you know, information. So I can support it. Unless there's anything further, I'll move to calling the question. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. That takes us on to the next item, which has to do with district facilitation of volunteer projects. This is Councillor Jones' recommendation.
Yes, thank you. The recommendation is that staff prepare a report outlining how the district can facilitate volunteer projects, including a volunteer in parks program, with attention given to liability and insurance, to be presented to council in January 2023.
Oh, hold on, we need a seconder. So do we have a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Savage. Get through to the mover, Councillor Jones, go ahead.
Thank you. So I can refer you to page 131 of the agenda, where there's a very short report on that. If you want to look at it, fine. I'd like to add to it just to say that many communities, Nanaimo, right next to us included, have had such a program for years, Nanaimo since 1992. And the goals of these programs are generally to develop and improve parks and open spaces, and to do so by bringing together the talents, the energy, and the skills of residents to realize those goals. The benefits, what is gained is, you know, more and better green spaces and parks, and opportunities for people to get outside, to meet neighbors, to come together, to work together. It's great for health and for community spirit. The types of things that are done can be, it's really quite a range, really. Removal of invasive plants would be an example. Community gardens, neighborhood corner gardens, planting of trees, public art, benches that Councillor Savage referred to that would be nice to, as resting places when you're walking Lantzville Road. Litter cleanups, I've already had a neighbor approach me wanting to start a group for litter cleanup. Playgrounds, designs, development, you get the idea. I have personal experience with the Volunteer in Parks program from the community that I used to live adjacent to. That's the city of Port Moody, back about 15, 20 years ago. They started their first one, and it arose out of a problem. The city planner came to me and said, "Why in the world are these kids jumping on their bikes all over the concrete outside of City Hall?" And I said, "Well, that's actually quite a thing with the kids these days. It's a sport called bike trials, and those concrete features to them are wonderful obstacles." And he said, "Well, what can we do? Can we get them somewhere else? I think I've got the perfect spot under a bridge. You can't do anything else with it." And in 3 weeks, what had happened was we had designs for a trials park by volunteers that were very competing at an elite level in the competitive aspect of the sport. We had a $3,000 donation from the Rotary Club, and we had 3 work days scheduled. We had assistance from the city of Port Moody in the form of dump trucks and large rocks, which the community is always wanting to get rid of, and they're nice to hop around on a bike also. And a local landscaping company donating gravel and some other things. So basically, after 3 work days and a great energy from volunteers, Bike Trials Park was built, and the park's estimated value was in the neighborhood of $100,000, and it cost $3,000 to do it. So these can be really amazing and effective, and I would be very excited to see it as part of this community. Thank you.
Councillor Savage?
Yeah, this is really a good one. I've seen so many spectacular projects volunteers have done elsewhere that I'd really like to see more of it here. And I still don't quite understand the process. I know the bus shelter is a prime example where talented engineers and carpenters and so on were left to it with good results. But I don't know how you go through that process again and sort of what the rules are, guidelines, and I think that's part of what you're saying, Councillor Jones, is to make it really clear for people what process they go through if they have a project. Generally with Rotary, they're so used to doing it, and they've got their own charity, financial setup, and so on, that they can do it easily, but I would sort of like to see a process where it's easier for groups of people to, and you know, the mayor and I on our little Christmas tree lighting committee, we kind of just do it, but I would prefer a process to sort of, you know, where it's authorized or insurance considerations, liability and considerations and so on. So I'd just like to get the sort of a gambit of how you start the process from A to Z. If you do want to do a volunteer project, what the guidelines are, that sort of thing. So certainly support it. Thank you.
Okay, through to Director Coates, and I'm sure you're going to probably speak to process, so.
Yes, and actually it's been Director Spears who's been spearheading more of the volunteer programs. Obviously, a lot of the community's not aware that these things are happening now. But at the same time, you know, we are limited by the amount of staff time there is to, one, organize, and two, take it through our insurer MIA to ensure we're following those processes that we have to have in place. So everybody's protected, the municipality and the participants. So currently, you know, we've had the recent experience of the Rotary Bench program. So again, it's groups will approach the district about doing something. We look at it from staff and say, does it require a council approval? In that case, it did, because there was a suspension of benches at that point. So we brought it to council. And then the rest of it is coordinated between staff and the group doing it. So we've also had a regular litter cleanup groups that work with Public Works. We had a program where there was removal of invasive species in a waterway. And so we coordinated that with one of the fisheries guys and with staff, and also made sure we had it noted who was there and volunteering, so we were sure there was insurance coverage. For another project, when the playground was being done, we advertised for donations and for people to participate. It wasn't as, as successful from that perspective, but we did get the project done. The suggestion that in other municipalities, they have things like the leadership and training program. A lot of those programs, we've seen them in other municipalities where we work too, and but they have a recreation department with full-time staff who are organizing and handling that part of it. I've seen volunteer programs where it's the fire department and they're coordinating kids coming in and doing projects and future firefighters sort of programs. So certainly there's lots of options. We're happy to provide a report outlining, how it could work, but we have to acknowledge and recognize the limitation of staff in their ability, not their ability, but in the time, the resource that's available for supervising. So it's almost like I'm saying we don't want the volunteer program to be too successful unless we're hiring more staff.
Yeah, so for myself, I like the motion. It's pretty straightforward. I think really it just boils down to establishing a process, and having gone through a little bit of this myself, in helping volunteer groups do this, it's not necessarily the easiest thing to navigate, or maybe not everybody's going to know where to refer people to and so on. So I think it'd be helpful just to have a basic document that outlines, if somebody wants to do a volunteer project, where do you start? What are going to be the steps, and likely what are going to be the considerations? And so I can speak, to the Rotary project that they're undertaking, and that mental health walkway and the memorial bench that they're doing up on the E&N Trail. And, that one, again, required, connecting a few parties and getting the process started, but not everybody's going to know how to do that, or even where to start. So for me, this is about just clearly outlining, or even, for council to know, like, if a request is coming your way, where do you point them? Or what can you provide somebody, and so on. So I think it really has everything to do with just the process. And I think Rotary is probably a prime example. Like, they have just outside on the corner here, they have the Rotary little park that they take care of, and but that requires coordination with staff, and making, when they go to do their yearly maintenance, or could be biannual maintenance or what have you. But it does require coordination. Yeah, go ahead.
I'd be in big trouble too if I didn't mention the Broom Busters, because that's an annual one. It's a big one, and they coordinate through Public Works so that Public Works picks up the things they trim afterwards.
Yeah. So there, there's some coordination with staff, but again, my experience, it's, when you might be talking to someone who might have there's a lot of potential, or partnership potential there, to actually get something done for the betterment of the community. Once you've established that, you have to know what the process is. And for the most part, I've just kind of fumbled around and probably used my position of mayor to maybe get things done. But it's important for everybody to be on equal footing, and know the process. And if you're able to connect somebody with our community, or that's within our community, to do some kind of project for the betterment of our community, hey, let's get her done, right? So that's straightforward. Hopefully we won't have to hire new staff to do that, but I guess if we had too many volunteers, that'll be a good problem, right? Through to Councillor Mundell and Councillor Lerner.
Yeah, and I know I've had a similar conversation, probably with the same neighbor, about the litter cleanup. And I've noticed around the community, there is a lot of litter in the ditches. And if somebody's willing to work with staff to put a group together to even just, I think we talked about having like owning a little pocket of your neighborhood and that being sort of your group's responsibility is to keep that area clean and tidy. It probably wouldn't take that much work, and that's probably actually reducing costs for our public works department, who eventually somebody's going to get called to go clean up that trash. So in the end, it could actually save us a bit of money where our staff don't have to be going around picking up all that garbage or trash or participating in getting these initiatives accomplished. Because we have volunteers doing it. So I can actually see a bit of a benefit to the community in that way, and numerous others. So, and as the mayor mentioned, having a centralized process can just be the little piece that gets that whole, the whole project moving. So just the fact that we've had that conversation probably with the same neighbor, and that, you know, there's no momentum quite yet around that, just tells me that we just need a key piece to get that started. And I think with staff's facilitation, that could be the means of getting things done.
Okay, so Director Coates, yeah.
Yeah, and we do have some individuals already who do clean up, and then they contact us, and Public Works picks up what they've cleaned up. I do want to emphasize, though, whenever staff is processing these requests and handling them, we are very conscious and respectful of our QP members and the bargaining unit duties, and we're not in any way replacing those.
Yeah, good point. Councilor Lerner?
Yes, I think this is a delightful motion that focuses a little bit on solidifying the process, as Mayor Swain said. And we have amazing, I guess, nonprofits and charities already in the community. Thank you for the mention of Broom Busters. It really is wonderful. I volunteered in my neighborhood 2 years now on that, and it was an amazing opportunity to bring people together around something. So in Vancouver, I know they have a program called Snow Angels where people can volunteer to shovel the driveways of senior citizens and things like that who cannot do it themselves. So this is an opportunity, I think, that just solidifies the process, and this report would help us the new council understand what our options are, and then put in together a process for the community to understand what their options are. So I think this is a very important motion. Thank you.
And Councilor Jones?
Yes, so I'll just speak briefly to process, because I understand the concern from staff about the work, and so I'll just point you to the solution that Nanaimo's come up with in terms of the process. Let's say you want to volunteer to do something, I don't know, pull the English ivy out of Huddlestone Park. You go online and you download this two-page form right here, where basically you just give your group's name, the number of volunteers, some contact information, location for where you're going to work, a date where you're going to work. You tick some boxes about what type of work you're going to do: invasive plant removal, litter cleanup. There are a few others. And you tick some boxes if there's some other needs that you have that the district might be able to help out with, or some other party like garbage bags or litter pickers, for example. So that's a very quick and easy system to get in place for residents to propose something. And if this is still too much work for staff, looking and sort of vetting the proposals, then there may be other options, such as using the Parks and Trails Committee as an intermediary, where this form goes to that committee, and they all sit down and have a good chat about it and hash out some details, so that you're getting something more polished to staff, and saves you a little bit of time there. Thank you.
Okay. All right, unless there's anything further, I'm going to call the question. Okay, all those in favor, And opposed, that's carried unanimously. Takes us into late items. Any late items to be introduced? Okay, any notices of motion? And now we're on to item 15, which is public clarification. So persons recognized by the chair to speak must first state their name and address for the record, and the agenda item regarding which they are seeking clarification, and may speak once for up to 2 minutes to ask clarification questions. For example, how did the vote go? Any technicalities, requesting interpretation, abbreviations, or jargon used. Is any members of the gallery wishing to seek public clarification? Okay, come to the mic and make it go red. And name and address for the record, please.
Brian Blood, 7075 Gillette Road. Two items. The one I spoke on earlier, just to kind of provide some clarification to you in support of your decision on the Lantzville Road Active Transportation upgrades. It wasn't shovel-ready, and
Mr. Blood, you're to ask
ready to-
clarification questions,
right,
not to
okay, ready to
reopen our
go,
debate.
Ready to go, which you, your worship, mentioned twice. It was, you said it was ready to go. What did you mean by that? Because it clearly was not ready to go.
Well, my understanding is that it was shovel ready to go. So meaning that,
Can you say anything about what that understanding was?
well, I'm not going to get into debating. I'm sure we can provide you with information. But really, it's just about, again, jargon used.
Okay, fair enough. And what are the
How'd the vote
odds
go?
that we would have gotten the grant? I mean, you can apply for a grant.
No idea.
Okay. So again, if you apply for the grant, odds are you don't get it. The province and the federal government, really, they spend more time looking at how not to give you a grant than how to give it. I know
But again,
that-
you're just asking clarification questions?
Yep, okay. And on the volunteer program, solidifying the process as long as it doesn't turn into stone. And
Is there a question about
Yeah,
how the vote went?
yeah.
Or
I think that I would encourage staff and council to look at the ones that have already been mentioned, the volunteer programs.
And again,
that
Mr.
work
Blood,
very well.
this is not a time for dialogue or
Okay.
providing personal opinion or comment.
Then consider the Mid-Island Rose Society and their Rose Project in Huddlestone Park, which hasn't been mentioned, and the Historical Society's project. Those volunteer programs work excellent. And Jason is a great worker and helps us a lot with those.
Okay. Thank you for your comments, but again, if it's more for clarification, so council's listening, and again, we will be looking at our council procedural bylaw at some point into the future, and if council wishes to change the nature of the public clarification session at the end of our meetings, then it'll be council's prerogative at that time. But in the meantime, again, if there are members of the gallery that are seeking public clarification, this is your time. So are there any other members of the gallery wishing to seek clarification? Okay. Hearing or seeing none, we need a motion to close the meeting. Someone prepared to make that motion. And go ahead, Councillor Savage.
We've got that the regular council meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 91A, C, D, E, F, G, and I of the, or L, it looks like, I,
It's
of the
I.
community charter for the purpose of considering personal information about an identifiable individual who
Oh, yeah, that's fine. Just
Thank
the
you.
letters is good. Do we have a seconder? Second by Councillor Lerner. Discussion. Hearing or seeing none, I'll move to call in question. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously.